you are losing your life. Not to illness, not to tragedy, to someone else's highlight reel. Every time you measure your chapter 3 against someone else's chapter 20, every time you scroll and feel the quiet erosion of your own satisfaction, every time you look at what another person has and feel what you have shrink, you are not being motivated. You are being robbed. Quietly, willingly, and the thief is you. The Stoics saw this trap with devastating clarity nearly 2,000 years before the algorithm made it worse. And today, we are going to dismantle it piece by piece using the ancient wisdom that has outlasted every empire, every trend, and every cultural moment that promised happiness through comparison. Stay with me, because by the end of this, the way you see yourself and everyone around you will never be quite the same. 1. The trap is older than you think. There is a story about a Roman senator named Gaius who, by every measurable standard of his time, was extraordinarily successful. He had wealth, political influence, a respected family name, and a villa that overlooked the Mediterranean. He had, in the language of his era, everything. And yet Gaius was miserable, not because anything in his life had gone wrong, but because his neighbor, a man of similar rank and background, had just been appointed to a position Gaius had always quietly wanted. From the moment he heard the news, the villa felt smaller. The wealth felt insufficient. The family name felt less distinguished. Nothing in his actual life had changed by a single measurable fact, but the comparison had changed everything. Seneca, writing in the 1st century AD, could have been writing about Gaius or about any one of us when he observed that most human suffering is not caused by what we lack, but by our awareness of what others possess. He wrote, "It is not the man who has little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." Read that again slowly. It is not the man who has little, it is the man who craves more. Poverty, in the Stoic understanding, is not primarily a material condition. It is a psychological one, a relational one. It lives not in your bank account, but in the space between what you have and what you have just seen someone else have. This is the trap, and it is ancient. It predates social media by millennia. The human tendency to measure oneself against others is not a modern pathology created by Instagram or LinkedIn or the neighbor's new car. It is woven into the social fabric of our species. The Stoics knew this, which is why they built, carefully and deliberately, an entire philosophical counter-architecture designed to free the mind from its grip. But here is what makes our era uniquely dangerous: the scale. For most of human history, you compared yourself to the people you could actually see: your neighbors, your colleagues, the people in your immediate community. The comparison pool was limited by geography and social proximity. What you didn't know couldn't wound you. Today, the comparison pool is effectively infinite. At any moment, you can access a curated, filtered, professionally lit version of the lives of millions of people who are richer, more successful, more beautiful, more traveled, more accomplished, more everything, and hold that image up against the unfiltered, unedited, unglamorous reality of your own daily existence. It is, as the Stoics would have immediately recognized, a recipe for a particular kind of quiet, chronic, structurally manufactured misery. Not dramatic suffering, not acute crisis, just the slow, steady draining of contentment from a life that, examined honestly and without the distorting lens of comparison, would reveal itself to be genuinely, deeply, sufficiently good. The trap is old. The bait has simply been modernized. 2. What comparison actually steals from you? A woman named Sophie had spent 3 years building a small independent business, a graphic design studio that she ran from her home. She worked hard. She was good at what she did. She had a growing client base, financial independence for the first time in her adult life, and work that genuinely engaged her. By any honest accounting, she was doing well. Then she attended an industry conference, and she spent 2 days surrounded by people who seemed to be doing better. Bigger agencies, larger teams, higher profile clients, more impressive offices. By the time she drove home, the business she had been quietly proud of felt inadequate. The growth she had been genuinely excited about felt slow. The work she had found meaningful felt small. Nothing about her business had changed in 48 hours. But something about how she experienced it had changed completely. And it took her months of distraction, dissatisfaction, and second-guessing to find her way back to the clarity she had before the conference. What did comparison steal from Sophie? Not her business, not her skill, not her clients. It stole her present-tense experience of her own life. It stole the satisfaction that was rightfully hers. It stole months of productive, focused, genuinely creative energy and replaced them with a low-grade anxiety that served no useful purpose whatsoever. This is what comparison always steals, regardless of the domain: career, relationships, appearance, finances, parenting, creativity. It steals the present. It steals your direct experience of your own existence and replaces it with a second-hand, distorted, inherently unfair measurement against a version of someone else's life that is almost always incomplete, curated, or simply not comparable to yours in any meaningful way. Marcus Aurelius addressed this with characteristic directness. He wrote, "How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it?" Replace anger with comparison, and the principle holds perfectly. How much more grievous are the consequences of comparison than the actual deficits it claims to identify? Because here is the structural dishonesty at the heart of every act of comparison. You are comparing your inside to their outside. You are comparing the full, messy, complicated, anxious, doubting interior experience of your own life with all its context, all its history, all its unglamorous daily reality to the surface presentation of someone else's existence. A presentation that has been, consciously or not, constructed for external consumption. You know your failures. You don't know theirs. You know your doubts. You don't know theirs. You know what it cost you to get where you are. You almost certainly don't know what it cost them. Epictetus, who knew more about unfair starting conditions than almost anyone he was born into slavery, understood this with a clarity that could only come from lived experience. He taught his students that the desire to have what others have, or to be what others are, was not just philosophically misguided. It was a fundamental category error. It was attempting to evaluate your own life using a measuring stick that was never designed to measure it. Your life has its own scale, its own terrain, its own timeline. Measuring it against someone else's is not just inaccurate, it is meaningless. Like judging the quality of a river by comparing it to a mountain. 3. The Stoic alternative: the inward turn. There was a young Stoic student. History does not record his name, but Epictetus mentions him in his discourses, who came to his teacher troubled. He had been observing his fellow students and had concluded that several of them were making faster philosophical progress than he was. He wanted to know what he was doing wrong. Epictetus listened to him carefully. Then he asked a single question: "When you observe your fellow students, what exactly are you looking at?" The student described their behavior, their composure, their articulate responses, their apparent ease with the philosophical exercises. Epictetus nodded slowly. Then he said something the student never forgot. "You are watching their performance. You have no access to their practice. Come back when you are watching your own." The inward turn. This is the Stoic antidote to comparison, not the suppression of awareness of others, not willful blindness to the world around you, but the disciplined redirection of evaluative attention from the external to the internal. From what others appear to be doing to what you are actually doing. From what others seem to have to what you are genuinely building. The Stoics called this prosoic self-attention. The practice of directing your observational faculties inward toward your own thoughts, your own choices, your own character, your own progress. Not navel-gazing, not self-obsession, but the philosophical understanding that the only life you have genuine data on, complete, contextual, fully informed data is your own, and therefore the only life you can meaningfully evaluate, improve, and be responsible for is your own. Marcus Aurelius practiced this with extraordinary consistency. The Meditations, that private journal never written for publication, is perhaps the most sustained example in literary history of a person who had every external reason to compare himself favorably to others, choosing instead to compare himself only to his own stated values and falling short of them. He was the Emperor of Rome. He could have spent his reflective hours congratulating himself on his position. Instead, he spent them asking, quietly and rigorously, whether he was living up to his own philosophical commitments. "Confine yourself to the present," he wrote, "and then, elsewhere. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Not compare yourself to other men and determine whether you are better. Not measure your goodness against the goodness of those around you. Simply be one. Right now, in this moment, according to your own understanding of what that means." This is the liberation the Stoics were pointing toward. Not the liberation of being better than others. The liberation of being free from the need to be better than others. The liberation of a life measured not against the infinite, shifting, ultimately irrelevant standard of what other people are doing, but against the clear, stable, deeply personal standard of who you are trying to become. Think about what this would mean for your daily life. If every morning you woke up and the only question you asked yourself was, "Am I a little closer today to the person I want to be than I was yesterday?" Not compared to your colleague, not compared to your friend's Instagram, not compared to your sibling's salary, just compared to your own yesterday. How would that change the texture of your day? The quality of your attention? The direction of your energy? The inward turn is not easy. In a world that has built an entire economy around external comparison, around making you feel insufficient, so you will buy something to fix it, choosing to evaluate your life by your own internal standards rather than external social ones, is a daily act of philosophical resistance. But it is the only measurement that ever actually tells you anything true. 4. When comparison disguises itself as ambition. Here is the most seductive version of the trap, the one that is hardest to recognize because it wears the face of something virtuous. A man named Daniel was a driven, talented architect in his mid-30s. He worked long hours. He pushed himself constantly. He was, by his own description, deeply ambitious. And when people asked him what drove him, he always said the same thing. "I want to be the best I can be. I want to reach my full potential." It was only after years of therapy, years of quietly examining what was actually happening inside him, that Daniel arrived at an uncomfortable truth. He was not, in fact, driven by the desire to reach his full potential. He was driven by the desire to exceed specific people. His more successful college friend, his brother who had made partner at his firm before him, his mentor who had won an award Daniel had always privately wanted. His ambition was entirely relational, entirely comparative. Remove those specific people from the picture, and the drive would have largely collapsed. Because it was never really about becoming the best version of himself. It was about being better than them. The Stoics had a name for this kind of motivation. They called it philodoxia, the love of reputation, the addiction to being seen as superior. And they considered it one of the most insidious traps a person could fall into, precisely because it mimics virtue. It looks like ambition. It feels like drive. It sounds, when you describe it, like self-improvement. But underneath, it is a fundamental dependence on others, on their failure relative to your success, on their lower position relative to your higher one, that makes your entire sense of well-being contingent on external conditions you cannot control. What happens when Daniel's friend achieves something new? He spirals. What happens when his brother gets promoted again? He loses sleep. What happens when his mentor wins another award? His own work, no matter how good, feels hollow. This is the hidden cost of comparison dressed as ambition. Not just the misery it causes in the present, The structural instability it creates in your relationship to your own work. Because if your motivation is comparative, your satisfaction will always be comparative too. And that means your satisfaction is always only one other person's success away from evaporating. Epictetus was ruthless about this. Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are. Applied to ambition, seek not that your progress be measured against others' progress. Seek only that your progress be real, that your work be genuine, that your growth be yours. True ambition, Stoic ambition, is directional, not relational. It points toward a version of yourself that is better than yesterday's version. It is entirely indifferent to whether that version is better or worse than the version your neighbor is working toward, because that, fundamentally, is none of your philosophical business. Daniel eventually arrived at this understanding. It did not make him less productive. If anything, it made him more productive because for the first time, his energy was going into the work rather than into the exhausting mental accounting of where he stood relative to everyone else. He started building things he actually wanted to build rather than things he thought would impress the specific people whose opinions had been running his life. The work got better, and more importantly, he could actually enjoy it. 5. The Stoic practice. How to escape the trap daily. Understanding the trap intellectually is one thing. Escaping it in the lived, daily, phone-in-hand reality of modern life is another. The Stoics were not theorists. They were practitioners, and they left us specific, concrete disciplines for exactly this kind of psychological liberation. The first practice is what Seneca called reckoning with what you have. Not gratitude in the soft, greeting card sense, but a disciplined, deliberate, almost forensic examination of the actual contents of your life. What do you have? What can you do? Who is in your corner? What have you built? What have you survived? What do you know now that you didn't know 5 years ago? Seneca prescribed this practice specifically as an antidote to the poverty of comparison. Because comparison, by its nature, directs your attention toward what is absent. The Stoic reckoning deliberately redirects your attention toward what is present. And what is present, examined honestly, is almost always more than the comparison-distorted mind can see. The second practice comes from Marcus Aurelius, the practice he called viewing from above. The deliberate imaginative act of lifting yourself out of your immediate social context and seeing your life from a wider vantage point. From above, the differences between your income and your colleague's income are almost invisible. From above, the social hierarchies that organize so much of daily human suffering are revealed as the temporary, constructed, ultimately arbitrary arrangements they actually are. Marcus used this practice to manage the extraordinary social pressures of imperial life, surrounded constantly by people who were watching him, judging him, measuring themselves against him and him against them. The view from above gave him access to a perspective in which those measurements lost their power, in which what mattered was not how he appeared relative to others, but how he actually was relative to his own philosophical commitments. The third practice is the most demanding. Choose your comparisons deliberately, or choose none at all. If you are going to compare, and the honest Stoic acknowledgement is that total elimination of comparison may be beyond most of us, then compare yourself only to yourself. To who you were last year, to the standard you set for yourself, to the version of yourself you are trying to build. And if you find yourself comparing to others, catch it. Name it. Ask the Stoic question: is this within my control? Is the other person's success within your control? No. Is your response to it within your control? Entirely. Then where should your attention go? There is a fourth and final practice the Stoics returned to repeatedly, and it is perhaps the most philosophically powerful of all: memento mori applied to comparison. Remember that you will die. Remember that the person you are comparing yourself to will die. Remember that the difference in your respective positions, the salary gap, the follower count, The status differential will be completely and permanently irrelevant within a time frame that, viewed against the full scale of human history, is essentially instantaneous. This is not morbid. In Stoic philosophy, the contemplation of mortality is not a counsel of despair. It is a counsel of proportion. It gives you back your sense of what actually matters by removing the artificial urgency that comparison manufactures around things that do not. You are here for a brief, singular, unrepeatable time. The question is not whether you have more than the person next to you. The only question that will still feel meaningful when you are old and honest, is whether you did something real with what you had. Return to your own life. Let us come back to where we began. You are losing your life to someone else's highlight reel. But here is what the Stoics knew, and what every rare, philosophically serious person eventually comes to understand. You can stop. Not perfectly. Not permanently. Not without daily recommitment. But you can stop. You can choose, each morning, to return to your own life. To measure your days by your own values rather than other people's visible achievements. To build something real rather than something impressive. To feel the actual texture of your own existence, its genuine satisfactions, its real beauty, its specific and unrepeatable quality rather than the pale, anxious shadow of an existence lived in permanent comparison to others. The Senator Gaius, in our opening story, spent the rest of his life in the shadow of his neighbor's appointment. He never recovered the satisfaction he had felt before. He died, by ancient historical account, a bitter and diminished man not because of what he lacked, but because of what he refused to stop wanting. You do not have to be Gaius. Epictetus survived slavery. Marcus Aurelius survived empire. Seneca survived exile. Each of them found, through philosophy and practice, a relationship with their own existence that could not be destabilized by what someone else had or achieved or became. That relationship is available to you. It has always been available to you. It requires no special circumstances, no material upgrade, no change in your external position. It requires only the choice made daily, recommitted to constantly, practiced imperfectly and honestly to live inside your own life rather than in comparison to someone else's. Your life is not a rough draft of someone else's final version. It is the only edition that will ever exist. Treat it accordingly. Subscribe to Stoic Reflections for more ancient wisdom that actually applies to the life you are living right now. Hit the bell. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And come back next time, because we are just getting started.